Welcome to the MS Dev Show, episode number 166. This episode is from our three-part special from that conference in Wisconsin Dells.
Raygun gives you complete visibility on errors, crashes, and performance problems affecting your end users. Replicate issues in seconds rather than digging through log files or having to rely on users to report errors or crashes. Raygun gives you a window into how users are really experiencing your software applications. Check it out today at raygun.com. This episode of the MS Dev Show is brought to you by Expose, the market leader of .NET and Java APIs for file business formats. Natively work with DocX, XSLX, PPT, PDF, MSG, MPP, image formats, and many more. Right now we have Rachel Krause. She's a user experience engineer at Concurrency. Welcome. And you also help run MKE.net, is a local conference.
Yeah, I'm on the speaker committee for MK.net and kind of help put all the logistics together, so it's pretty fun.
So you know a little bit what it takes to put on something crazy like this.
I heard it's really easy.
Yeah, super easy. Takes no time at
10
all.
10 minutes of planning.
We just wing it. It's great.
Yeah, last week Clark, he reached out and he said, oh, shoot, I got to start thinking about that conference again.
Yeah, no, it's we started this way early this year. Planning MK.net pretty much as soon as we wrapped up last year's in October. It was like, okay, let's think about next year in 2017. So we made some big changes. We're really excited. So it'll be a great time in September.
Awesome. Well, thank you for volunteering and putting forth so much energy in something like that.
Yeah.
I know it's always fun being at places like this.
Yeah, definitely.
And tomorrow you're actually giving a talk here about CSS frameworks.
I am, yeah. It's Think Outside the Jumbotron, choosing a CSS framework.
So that means there's more than Bootstrap, is what you're telling me.
Believe it or not, there is more than Bootstrap. Yeah, it was a shock to me as well.
So what is out there? Give us the overview.
Yeah, so I'm going to go through Bootstrap, Foundation, Skeleton, and then if you want to roll your own, so if you want to start from scratch or just use a grid, and kind of go through some of the pros and cons of each, and just kind of wind in some of my own stories that I've had with each of them, to just show that we don't have to use Bootstrap for everything, and the internet can look different. So that's my primary goal.
I don't have time for that. So are these what is the relative popularity then? Are we seeing a shift? Because we were just talking to JS dude, and and he was talking about. Angular was so popular, and now there's all these other frameworks that are sort of taking over. So is the same thing happening on the other side of the house then?
I don't know that it's necessarily getting more popular, these other frameworks. I think it's more a matter of we're building new frameworks to suit new or suit different uses for them.
Yeah.
So, Skeleton's super lightweight, Bootstrap's kind of heavy, and I think a lot of people just go to Bootstrap because that's what they're used to, and we reach for what's comfortable. And my challenge is to say, hey, there's all these other frameworks out there. Let's see, are we really using this for the right reasons?
Right. So what are some of the criteria then? You mentioned lightweight.
Yeah.
For Skeleton, I had never even heard of Skeleton. I'm so out of it now. So, I just I was talking to JS dude and I was mentioning it's just paralysis whenever I try to start a project now because there's so many options. So what are my criteria? How do I actually pick one?
Well, you kind of have to think about the site that you're building, how the development process is going to work. So, if you're working together with a whole bunch of developers and maybe we've all used Bootstrap, we're building a complex application. Yeah, cool, use Bootstrap. That's a perfect example of it. But maybe if you're doing something that's a little more higher designed, you've got crazy mock-ups for it, maybe you want to reach for something that's going to be a little easier to overwrite because Bootstrap's got a lot of border radiuses and a lot of, just fluff design that you could reach for Foundation or Skeleton instead. So kind of keeping those things in mind.
So these are frameworks. Are they all built with kind of the same tools? Are they all SAS, or are they straight CSS or less? I mean,
it's a mix. Yeah. So the new Bootstrap version 4, which is still in alpha, they support SAS, whereas 3 was less. Skeleton doesn't have a preprocessor, unfortunately, but there's only 400 lines of straight CSS, which is crazy.
So it's pretty easy to go in and just kind of get it all in your head.
Yeah, and if you wanted to use a preprocessor with Skeleton, you could. There's plugins out there. So I think there's enough of a community for all of them that you can find what you need depending on what you're building.
Okay. And then what about, if I'm choosing a particular framework, is that going to cause me issues? I mean, are they pretty open now? So if I'm using, he just introduced me to Vue.js.
Sure.
So like, can I use Vue.js in Skeleton?
Oh yeah, I mean Skeleton specifically is straight up CSS.
Oh, okay.
It's not anything else. So they don't have JavaScript like Bootstrap does. Bootstrap's got the plugins for accordions or drop downs.
Oh, okay.
Skeleton doesn't have any of that.
Okay.
So it's basically the front end style of everything.
Okay. Now I gotta go look this up.
Yeah,
Get
he's learning on
skeleton.com.
the fly. He does this all of the time.
Images of skeleton. It's
all
like
pictures
literal
of
skeletons.
So what I gotta search for probably like skeleton CSS.
Yeah, there you go.
There we go.
So, I mean, our audience is primarily developers. So, I mean, as a developer, what are some aspects that we might be interested in when looking at these compared to someone like you who's a little bit more user experience focused?
Yeah, and I do front end development of all of the sites that I work on. So things that I like to look for and things that other developers that I've worked with is there an open community? If I type in an issue that I'm having with something, is Stack Overflow going to come up, or is an actual thread from Bootstrap going to come up and say, here's how to fix it, or is there good documentation there? And with all three of these, there's great documentation in terms of how to write your syntax and how to make it successful, and use cases for each component that you can use, which I think is really helpful. So as long as you have a good documentation and there's a good community out there, I feel like the developers will be happy.
Now, at the very beginning, too, you kind of also threw out another option, is kind of just like throw everything away and write it all from scratch.
Yeah, it's a scary option.
Is it scary nowadays? Because, like, when I started, that was the only way to happen.
Yeah, right. And I think everyone is mostly scared when they do that of cross browser functionality. So like, am I going to be able to like make something in Chrome that looks and works the same in Firefox or Safari or Edge? Am I going to be able to make something that works across all of those? And I think that's the biggest fear, and that's why people just straight up go to Bootstrap.
Is it easier nowadays, though, than it was back kind of like in the browser war days? Because we see the browsers working better together.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Is it better nowadays than it was 5 years ago?
Oh, absolutely. It's 100% better. I remember, just nothing working in IE, 9 when I made something, and then it was like, oh my God, what am I going to be able to do here? And so we had to roll back anything cool we did.
So we fixed that by just getting everybody off of IE.
Yeah, we just all use Edge now, or all use Chrome.
We just ignore that problem.
So now that, the browsers are kind of taking that responsibility to get up to speed, the frameworks are taking that responsibility to make something that works across everything, I think that, we're coming to a better coding environment with that.
So has that influenced the kind of state of design that's out there too? I mean, are we having better looking websites and mobile apps because of these frameworks and everybody working together?
I think it's a double-edged sword. They look better in terms of there's white space, and that comes automatically with a framework for free. But then we have this every website looks the same. We all have a Jumbotron. We all have this same navigation and the 3 sections underneath. And that's because of frameworks. And so there's that double-edged sword there.
That's actually kind of interesting because, if I remember correctly, Bootstrap was based on Twitter.
Yep.
And Twitter recently updated some of their font faces, and at least my Twitter feed went oh my gosh, what the heck did they do? This is horrible. And we don't want to be the same as everybody else, but yet when we do make changes, some people just can't handle that either.
For sure. And I think it depends on, you have to look at what site you're building. Are you building something that's brand new to the market? Are you building something where you're competing with another site, so yours just has to be better or has to be different? are you building a portfolio and you want it to just, look cool and amazing? Or is it something that needs to be straightforward? And so depending on what you're making, you can say, do I want to go more standard or do I want to go more innovative? And you can kind of balance that. So that's another thing I talk about is, how do we get a good balance between standardization and innovation?
Now, this is something I thought about too, is like, can CSS really affect the performance of my website too?
Oh yeah, for sure. So Bootstrap has close to 7,000 lines of CSS if you download it and use everything, counted. And it's heavy. So if it may not be significant, because we're using, high-speed internet and you don't have to worry about that.
Potentially a CDN too, like a central CDN.
Right.
But at the same time, not everybody is doing that.
Exactly. And, some people are stuck in, underground and they literally are working in a basement and, they don't have high-speed internet. If I have a lot of crazy styles or a lot of crazy overwrites on Bootstrap trying to make my own styles, that can get just a little bit slower, which can kind of hinder that user experience.
So that's still something we need to be very cognizant of.
Absolutely. So that's why if I'm making a simple site, I don't have to use Bootstrap. That's 7,000 lines of CSS. I can go to the 400 lines of CSS and skeleton and still get my design and everything out there.
I'm just going plain text. I'm going for information efficiency.
That's mobile responsive, Jason.
There you go.
Yeah,
maybe not quite mobile responsive.
Yeah.
But.
So any other, you're doing a presentation on, so any other interesting tidbits in there other than, it's not just comparing the frameworks. Is there anything else in there that you think is really worth mentioning?
Yeah, really the main thing I want to get across is like, let's make the internet better. Let's not just always go for what makes us comfortable. I worked with a client where the legal department mandated Bootstrap as like the starting point for every website. And I was like, legal department. And I was like, wait, why? Why does everything have to? Well, that's just what we used the first time. And so legal had to take it and do it. And I was like, what? And so, we had another thing where we were using a bunch of things that required Node.js. And then legal denied Node.js, but approved everything else. And we were like, you literally don't understand.
Yeah.
So like, there's those, kind of personal stories that it really led me to this conversation and to this talk is why are we just always reaching for that same thing?
Yeah. No, it's a definitely a good area to focus on. For sure.
Yeah. And it's CSS and it's, fun stuff. And I know that last year I had a conversation with someone at lunch and we were talking about Bootstrap and it got like kind of, fired up and I was like, I'm just going to give a talk next year about it. And here I am. So.
Awesome.
You showed them.
Yeah. We'll see if they come. Just kidding.
So if people want to reach out to you or find you online, where's a good spot where people could do that?
I'm on Twitter. Unfortunately, Twitter does not let you change your name when you get married. So it's still under my maiden name.
You can change the display name, right?
So my display name, but not my Twitter handle. So my Twitter handle is @RachelBabiak. Babiak, and I will never apparently outgrow that name, unfortunately.
Well, Twitter will go under at some point.
Yeah, at some point, no one will be able to reach me on Twitter.
Flutter
anyway.
or whatever the next thing is, you'll get the right name. So.
But yeah, I'm on all the social networks: LinkedIn, Twitter.
Search
GitHub,
for you, we'll find you.
You will probably find me, and I'll probably talk to you about cats and cool things like that. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming in and talking to us.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Don't wait for users to report problems. Raygun gives you complete visibility on errors, crashes, and performance problems affecting your end users. Replicate issues in seconds rather than digging through log files or having to rely on users to report errors or crashes. Raygun gives you a window into how users are really experiencing your software applications, supports all major programming languages and platforms, and integrates with your current development workflow tools too. There's a free 14-day trial, and it takes minutes to implement, so start resolving issues in your application and check it out today at raygun.com. Right now we have John Kerr with us, and he is simply known as the JS Dude. Welcome.
It's nice to be here.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
So how do you get the title JS dude?
Oh, yeah. So this was like, I want to be like friendly to everybody. And
Yeah.
then like, whoever needs like a question or anything.
Yeah.
And I'm always open through my website or even my meetup groups. That's why I said like, okay, people have hard time to pronounce my name. I said, okay, just call me dude. And then I put like JS in front of it. So now people remember, okay, that's that JS dude.
Okay. Did you consider dude.js?
I have like, I didn't try for that, but that's a good one.
So you mentioned to me earlier, like you've been doing a lot of work with Angular and was it React?
Yes.
Yeah. So I guess we were going to kind of talk about that. So I'd like to hear like what you've been doing lately.
Oh, I see. Okay. So I have like maybe three part of me actually.
Yeah.
One part is like I'm working as a full-time developer, a senior web developer at Nielsen. And second part is I do like a lot of community stuff. So I organize
okay.
Chicago JavaScript meetup group for like 5 years. And I have another meetup group I just opened this year is like Chicago front-end developers.
Okay.
And then I go to conferences. So like this is my fourth year giving talk in this conference.
Okay.
And I go other conferences, like I have another one, Midwest JS. So I do all this talk. That's the second part. And third part is like I help people to learn programming. So I do like workshops about React, workshop about JavaScript, and also I wrote 2 books in like, it's not in English, but I wrote 2 books for learning programming. Those are in Bengali. So these are the 3 part of me, working, helping people, or writing blog or making YouTube tutorials. Little bit funnier way. So that's my goal.
Very cool. So what is the session here at this conference? So what was that on?
Oh, my session here is like functional programming, what, why, and how. Because people heard about functional programming and they get confused. Is it geeky thing? Is it so tough? And it's like people throws a lot of terminology, but underneath all this hard name, there is a very simple concept.
Yeah.
So my goal is to make it easy, nice, and funny for people to go through pretty much 90% of the things they need to know about functional programming.
Okay. And then what is your language of choice then for functional programming, or do you try everything?
Oh no, I use JavaScript because I'm JS dude,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
What else I would
Yeah,
use?
well, sorry, I'm a little slow. So how do you do functional programming in JavaScript then?
Oh, I see. Okay, it's very interesting. First of all, is most you need the mindset to do the functional programming. That okay, I want to write fewer function. So whatever your function you do like this one, and then you have like few helpers to make it easier. For example, you use immutable JS to make sure you are doing that, and you get do few other things is like you can use a Raman and few other, and as well as like in JavaScript, function is a first class citizen.
Yeah.
That means you can use everything you need for a functional programming.
Yeah.
And the hard part is to make your fellow developers having the same mindset. That's the challenging part. But language is not the challenging part.
Yeah, because I always think whenever you say like functional programming, I'm thinking like, oh, this guy does F sharp, and like, oh, if you're doing F sharp, like you're magically functional. I know that that's like completely wrong, but my brain, there's a part of my brain that just like keeps saying that.
Yeah.
And then you say you're doing JavaScript and you're doing functional programming, and I'm like, okay, so it's just got, like you said, it's just got to be a little bit different way of doing things. So like, what is it? Like, is it like demonstrably better? Like, is it whenever you're working with these other people, are you always able to convince them like this is a better way of doing things?
Yes. So you always like convincing is like if I just go and then tell them that okay, we're doing functional programming, they will just go back and will not agree, right? So you have to find like a good use case to pursue it, right? And I have like a good example that comparing it with like object-oriented programming as well as like functional programming. So like one simple example is like first thing is like when you have cooking a lot of things together in a pot and everybody is adding something there, and it's harder to control what would be the final test.
Yeah.
So you do a separate one and then you test it. So that's the first analogy. And second one is like comparing inheritance versus composition. Inheritance is like telling you how your things should be, right? Rather than like you would say like the type is like it has the animal, it has the dog and those kind of characteristics. But it doesn't talk about activity. And when you start doing the activity, then you get a lot of unnecessary activities or code that the parents have. which your child might not need 50% of the case.
Yeah.
So your object footprint becomes bigger and your debugging becomes harder. Your call stack, it becomes like crazy. Rather, the functional one is like you do the composition. I need these functionalities, I just compose these two. There is no parent or child, this kind of thing. So if you find out like a good use case in your that causes a bug and said, okay, look, other than doing this way, if you do functional this way, you can do the debug and fixing this way, other than putting the class, decide how your hierarchy works, this kind of thing. Then the conversation starts with a like a positive intention toward the functional programming and becomes easier to like convince.
Okay.
It's a practical other than theoretical approach of like, okay, this is better.
Yeah.
And nobody will accept it.
Then you're not
Better.
the annoying functional guy. Like we must do everything functional here. It's more like, hey guys, I think there's a better way of doing X, Y, and Z, and
Yes,
let me
exactly.
show you. And then before you know it, you're just like, haha, you're doing functional programming.
Yes.
If somebody wants to start adding, pieces of functional programming into something that they're already doing, what are some good approaches to, doing it that way?
I see. The first thing you need to understand due to the functional is like pure function. Pure function is nothing but is like it has only one basic rule, and that basic is look, you will not have any side effect. And whatever you have side effect, you might still need some side effect to load data from the server or maybe doing some IO or the file, and you will put them a different module or different place. So these are the places where you have side effect, and these are your libraries. Say I'm doing some addition. This guy, if you are careful, you can do some cases of like, okay, this whatever the input, it will give the same output and it will not read anything global. These two things you remember, you will start pure function. Pure function is the core of functional programming. And then there are few intentions that we are a little bit reluctant when we come from like a .NET or Java. Those mindset is like we suddenly accessing like maybe database connection or something there. So the functional programming, you'll do the same thing, but you pass it as a parameter. So when you pass it parameter, now your function inside doesn't depend on external thing. You can test it. And it would be like, you can be certain what would be the output from it. So you become like more confident when you are writing unit test, when you are debugging, okay, this guy is not depending on external things.
Yeah.
So if my database connection fails, my function will not blow up. So like you will be more confident, okay, there is no problem here. Maybe there is a problem on the places where I put my side effect things. So just first thing you do, write pure function, and you are doing pure function already in your code. I can find maybe 30-40% is there. Just be aware of it. Okay, this is my pure function and I'm writing it. And then it starts doing little more where you can increase the number of pure function. That's the best and simplest starting point.
Okay. And then I know we're going to talk a little bit about like Angular and React. So like, what is the status of that whole set of frameworks? Because I feel like I haven't been paying attention for a few days, and now I'm like,
It's a different world,
I'm
right?
totally out of the loop. Because like you mentioned Angular 4 before, I didn't
Yes,
even.
4 and 5 is coming. So
Well, okay, so last I heard was Angular 2. So
Yeah.
so I'm super confused. And then I heard like it doesn't matter anyway because React is taking over. So like so what's the truth there?
I see. Okay. So the first thing is like they change the version system. So there is no Angular 3, 2. From 2 they go to 4. So like Windows,
course.
like
Yeah.
So those kind of you skipped a version, but that's not the case.
Yeah, my IQ is 1,000 by the way. I just skipped
Yeah.
between 50 and 1,000.
Then you might keep track of like Xbox version, like 360, Xbox One, those kind of thing. But yeah, so Angular has a good attempt to make it in a good way. So there is a two part we need to understand. One is like building a nice framework and making it popular is two different things.
Yeah.
You could have the best framework, but it might not be adopted widely.
Right.
And then time next year will tell. Maybe the end of next year, we will know that whether Angular is competing with React or not. But you can have some feelings based on your idea. I'm not going on that direction.
Okay.
So what I tell in a jokingly is that like Angular is good, but it has some problem for beginners. I call it like a gorilla banana problem. Maybe you ask for a banana now you got a gorilla holding that banana. And now, maybe you didn't ask for the gorilla, you just want the banana. That's it, right?
I love that. I love
So
that.
that's what
awesome.
that's what's one. And another thing I tell is so Angular team might have a fear that okay, the open free world they might have hard time to compete. So they tried to make it is like an Angular.net that I call Angular.net, which is Angular 2. So they put like TypeScript, which is really good thing.
Yeah.
And TypeScript has a lot of nice things like when you do like type safety, when you do like a teamwork with other people, it's good thing. And they put like few other things which is good. The good problem like RX RxJS, which is like reactive programming. You use those things. And then for debugging purpose, they put like Zone.js to make it perform better. But the problem is if, as you said, like if you didn't pay attention, 1 to 2, now you have to learn 5 things.
Yeah.
That means I told my student, whoever like coming to my workshop, I said, okay, Angular 2, you have to be aware of like 2 stepchildren and a step father before you get married to Angular 2.
Yeah.
Those are your RxJS, your TypeScript, and your Zone.js. Even you only signed up for Angular, you have to learn those things.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit barrier for the beginners, but once you get there, it becomes your like code standard really high.
Yeah.
And that could be a good thing. And my concern is that might bite back Angular for the people who are trying to switch to Angular or something.
Yeah, I feel like for like a hobby project, like something I just want to get out there as soon as possible, or I should say as quickly and painlessly as possible. Like I remember using Angular 1, and it was just kind of ridiculously easy to do it.
Yes.
And I know my code wasn't very good, but I got something out there, and it actually worked pretty well.
I see.
And then Angular 2 came along, and I was like, yes, TypeScript. I love TypeScript, and I loved all the stuff they did in Angular 2. But I'm like, yeah, unless this is like a project that I have months to spend on full time, I don't have time for that.
I see. Yeah. And one part of it is like, if I look back, say Angular 1 or every famous framework has some wow factor. So Angular 1 has like two-way binding wow factor.
Yeah.
And within a minute or two, you just have then a script tag and you do like an input tag, you get two-way binding right away.
Yeah,
wow,
it's magic.
Right? Magic. And React has their wow factor. And Angular 2, I didn't find any wow factor.
Yeah.
And if you want to just start it, okay, now you want to learn Angular, you have to install Angular CLI, which makes it powerful, but another barrier. And somebody is live loading this. You have the Webpack inside. So, and they do some switch in between like System.js to Webpack. So the tooling, the JavaScript is becoming harder for the beginners. And I doubt Angular might get into that same problem.
So it's kind of like, if I get bit by the right spider, I can become Spider-Man. I don't have to do anything else. But like if I want to become Batman, like step 1, get rich, step 2, like invent all these different things, and and I guess actually it's probably a bad example because I'd want Batman to be better than Spider-Man in my example, but you kind of get the point.
Yeah.
Okay, and then React, like I just haven't had the mental capacity to stay up to date with what's going on in React and really pay attention there. So like, I guess my first question is like, what's the deal with React?
I see. Okay, so like the recent thing is like they upgraded few times, and then also recently React is upgrading their diff algorithm, so that their animation becomes like more smoother. So they are like rewriting their diff algorithm. They're coming with something called Fiber, which it makes it much easier. And the good thing is React is like it got the Facebook effect and Instagram effect.
Yeah.
That's the number one important thing. And it was very lightweight.
Yeah.
And it gives you the freedom, flexibility. You don't need anything else, or you just can do it with self.
Okay.
And then that's the general mass it got. And then Redux came along to make like geeky guys happier with React. So they kind of like made the moderate group and the happier group happier, like with the Redux. And then it just grows. And then when who make the decision? Sometimes the nerdy guy make the decision, right? And they wants to like do their way. other than they are somebody else telling them. So that's the difference between actually React and Angular. React is like you have the freedom whether you use Redux or not. It's up to you.
Okay.
You can use something else, or your medium size. You don't have to use Redux, right? And if you use Redux Saga or Redux Thang, it's up to you. If you use like UI router or you use like React router, it's up to you. So you have the power, right? And Angular is like, okay, they gave you everything, and they could be right, but it's not, might not be feel yours.
Yeah.
So that might be the case. But React is like grabbing the way, but another thing in the corner is like knocking hardly is like Vue.js.
Okay.
So that's another interesting thing.
And this just in, while we were recording, the next one is out.
No, Vue.js is like already popular, and they passed
Okay.
Angular 1
Yeah.
number of stars in
Oh,
GitHub.
really?
They already passed.
So what is the deal with Vue.js then?
Vue.js make like the crazy things about Angular 1 and React is better. So the Vue.js is like they have like there are some problem with like two-way binding in Angular 1, and then there has a problem with how you create the component, those kind of thing. So they make those things like much easier, and there is a huge number of people interested about Vue.js. And even though the star in GitHub might not say a lot of things, but it is maybe the first thing I go and see that how many star on a GitHub project, and I know how many people are there. And if it is like less than 1,000, and I consider whether it's a good to incorporate in my repo or not, whether I have to support it to fix my problem or there will be somebody else there. So Vue.js, the Vue.js or Vue, whatever people says, is really, really cool. And I recently started playing with it. Didn't go far, but I have a plan to like explore it next few months. And in our JavaScript meetup group, we ask people what they want to learn or see in their next meetup. So Vue.js was one of the thing people were asking, and we set up for next month. So yeah, so there is like framework coming every day, and Vue is getting into the enterprise world, but it's already made a noise or an attention in the community already.
Okay, I've already deleted all my code. I'm starting with Vue.js.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know. So somebody listening, I mean, including myself, like I'm just paralyzed by choice.
I see. Yeah.
So I don't know. Like if I'm making something new, what should I use?
Okay, it depends. Like if you are doing, I would have like three options, right?
Okay.
So if you are making it for your side project,
Yeah.
or you are doing it for your organization, or you are doing something that you might need to hire people or those kind of thing.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so there's 3 points. So if first you are doing for yourself, you can do, okay, I want to maybe enhance my resume so that I will get the next job, and do a small market research, and you say, okay, there are some more people is looking for React developers, and if I want a career change or something, I will do my side project on React because it has a demand in the market. And second thing is like if you're doing it in the enterprise, it doesn't matter how cool is the new technology or the framework, you have to look at your team or how much time you have. And learning, like if you have like maybe 70% of your developer have to learn something, don't go for that.
Right.
If you have like 30% people needs to learn, go for it. So even if your team strength is jQuery, it's not horrible. jQuery still works, right? It's not like why we don't recommend it, because like to get the cool kids, we always want to put the big thing. So enterprise one, look at your team.
Yeah.
And with less impact, how you can get. And you have to look into like, the community itself, because some point of time you need to use something and you will need other people's help. So look for like side things, not only like Angular. Look at like what are the ecosystem there, whether Angular materials is good enough, or they have support for like Angular 2 D3 charts, whether you might use the charting, or maybe you want to use Google Analytics. Is there any Angular 2 Google Analytics? Otherwise, all these side things will increase your time maybe 3-4 times. And number 3 is like, what is the number 3?
Of the frameworks or the criteria?
Yeah.
The frameworks were Vue, React, and
As I
Angular.
said, and the criteria was like one was like for you, for your enterprise, and then third one
Oh, it was hiring.
Oh, hiring. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, so if you want to like hire people based on like your new project or something,
Yep.
definitely go something not the latest thing on the market, rather than someone
Right.
has a matured little bit.
Yeah.
So I would right now on next 1 or 2 months, I would rather go for a little stable one other than making a risk which might work or might not work. Because for an enterprise or for a project, I have an average time span of like 3 to 5 years. I want to support this code base.
Yep.
So a more already accepted platform will have higher chance of finding people other than the latest thing, which is cool, but enterprise product has to live at least 3 to 5 years. Otherwise, you will not get your money back.
Okay, cool.
So that's also like you will think based on that.
Okay. So where can people find you online?
Okay, people can find me. First, they can find me if they go to like the website thatjazzdude.com.
Okay.
They can find that, or they can find me the Twitter, which is like jazzdude005, or I have like YouTube tutorials.
Okay.
That also like Jazz Dude, and I make like tutorials. And when I make the tutorials or the workshop, I try to do it in a like a story way, other than not like a just okay, learn this after that, this after that, this after that. So like for example, when I teach React Jazz, it has a story. Someone try to make a friend, and then try to find a life partner.
Yeah.
And then the name of the partner is like potential partner is Emma. And then his name is John. So together he created a website called Emma-John, and that site is surprisingly similar to Amazon. So they're like, and then they can relate. Okay, that's how with a day workshop, that's how I can make a site like Amazon. And then it has like a smaller tip. So there is a decision making about the vacation, how these like two partners discuss about it, and based on that, okay, decided that okay, how we pass data from a parent component to the child component. So like your partner might win, but you will know that why wins and how you put it in your code.
Yeah.
So that's like a storytelling way of learning, because code syntax you will forget, I can guarantee it, but the story and the analogy you will never forget.
That's pretty clever. Awesome. Well, thank you, JS Dude.
Yes, and nice nice talking with you, and thanks for having me.
Aspose offers a powerful set of file management APIs with which developers can create applications which can create, open, edit, and save the majority of popular business file formats. Their product range supports a multitude of file formats, including Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, PowerPoint presentations, PDF documents, OneNote, Outlook, Project, Visio files, popular image formats, and many others. Aspose produces APIs for .NET, Java, and the cloud, which can be utilized in almost any modern language available today. Visit aspose.com for a free 30-day no limitations trial, and if you get stuck, message the friendly support team for help. All technical support is offered free of charge. And remember, if you are a lucky winner, you will receive a free developer small business license for Aspose.net, a powerful toolkit for working with Word documents in your applications.
Right, now we're talking to Dustin Ewer. He is a web developer, and I've seen him speak quite a few times at quite a few different user groups and conferences, so he's been around quite a bit.
Welcome.
Hello.
So, what is the title of your session?
So the title of my session is R. It's not just for pirates anymore.
I love it. I love it. So I guess I know that we're not like talking like a program manager or something like that where we're saying like telling us to explain every aspect, but like what is R? Because I mean I bet you if you went around, I mean this is a conference for developers, but I just have this feeling that I don't know, 99 out of 100 wouldn't be able to tell you what it actually is.
They might not even
maybe
get
9
close.
out of 10. Maybe 9 out of 10 would not be able to tell you what it is. So what is it?
So R is a statistical programming language. It's made by statisticians for statisticians. That is the tagline. And sometimes when you program in R, when you write R scripts, that becomes painfully obvious to you with some of the idiosyncrasies of R. But
Because I was just going to point out that I just read you're a web developer. You're not a statistician. So obviously there's something that we as mere developers and not statisticians can understand about this.
Absolutely. So there's a couple of different reasons you'd want to learn R. So if you're interested in any kind of statistics or data analysis, R is one of the two default choices. So you're either going to learn R or Python. They're functionally equivalent, but R is more statistically or more specific to statistics, whereas Python is a general purpose programming language, and then you just download libraries to do your statistical analysis.
So one of the things that we bring up on the show every time they do it is like the Stack Overflow developer surveys, and those are always like analyzed with R, if I'm correct, right?
They might be.
Okay. So I'm just saying, I mean, to me that seems like it would be a good fit then, because you're getting just all this information in via questionnaire, and you're just trying to crunch the numbers and trying to figure out what do they mean. So at the end of the day, we're trying to apply some sort of meaning to some sort of data.
Exactly, and R is a really great language for doing exploratory data analysis. So like if you're doing Stack Overflow and you have your survey data, R is a really good language to sort of write a kind of an ad hoc script to go through that data and come up with the different measurements.
Yeah, so I don't know. Have you done much work with Python then? I don't know if you're able to sort of compare and contrast then.
I've done a little bit of work with Python,
Yeah.
and I've taken like courses on doing data science in R and courses on doing data science in Python. And from a functional standpoint, they're functionally equivalent.
Okay.
So for everything you can do in R, there's probably a library that'll let you do the same thing in Python. In terms of why you'd want to pick R over Python there's two reasons. One is that R is embedded in lots of different technologies. So like if you're using SQL Server, R is embedded into SQL Server. If you're using like a Power BI, you can run R in Power BI. And the other thing is that Python is, it's a general purpose language, so you're shelling out to a library, and it's just longer. Whereas R is really low ceremony, and it's just less typing. So they're functionally equivalent, and roughly in terms of the statistics I've seen, they're about half and half. So half of the data scientists prefer R, half of them prefer Python. So roughly equivalent usage there.
That kind of sucks. Well, I'm just thinking, like, if I wanted to get into, that type of analysis, I mean, it almost sounds like I'd have to learn both. And I guess more importantly, I'm thinking, Python looks like an interesting language, because it's sort of JavaScripty to me, like from my perspective. It looks like something that I could pick up, fairly easily, and I could use it for like all sorts of things. And just sort of as an added side effect, it looks like I could use it for statistical analysis. So there's probably, like, most of our audience is going to be developers, and maybe some of them know Python. So for a developer, do you think there's value then in learning R, or should they just invest in Python?
So if you already know Python,
Yeah.
it's probably going to be a shorter time to usefulness to just learn the packages in Python.
Yeah.
But if you don't know R and if you don't know Python, I think it's really easy to use R. And they're both easy languages to learn. R is easy, Python is easy. They're both very low barrier to entry.
Okay.
And honestly, you can learn both of them. I mean, you can pick up R in an afternoon, and you can pick up Python in an afternoon, and be relatively proficient within a few days.
Oh, I always looked at R as being like super intimidating, but I
it's
never
not.
but I never looked at it. So
Like R is it's very JavaScripty, so it's dynamically typed, very loose language, very easy to pick up. Fortunately, unlike JavaScript, like their default number types are a little better chosen. Like you have an integer in R, and and it's not like a floating point, like your decimal type. It's an actual decimal type, so you don't have any weirdness there.
yeah.
So, I'm kind of looking at it this like, what does it look like for me? I've never touched statistics. I don't really have a data set. I want to learn R. Like, what do I need to get to Hello World of figuring out what's useful?
So in order to learn, I would say that to learn R, I would go ahead and get the data science workload in Visual Studio. Obviously, if we're going to do, if you're a Visual Studio developer, if not, you can get R Tools or you can get R Studio. And then R actually has a lot of built-in data sets for you to use. So that's one of the nice things about R is it's a whole environment for doing statistics. So there are things you can just run regular basic statistics on, like there's information about cars and flowers and all the sort of classic statistical data sets you see in textbooks. R has those built into the language. So you don't actually have to go and hunt and find your own data. It's there for you.
Okay. And how do I actually install that environment then?
So if you're in Visual Studio, you
Yeah.
go to the installer and you install the data science workload.
Okay.
And that will install everything for you. And then you have our tools for Visual Studio.
Okay.
That's with the data science workload, and then that's pretty much all you have to do.
Okay.
If you're not doing Visual Studio, you have to go and get R Studio, which is also good, but it's a little bit different. And then you download R separately.
Okay. And then the reason I'm going to ask my next question is I just want to gauge the interest level at the conference here. How many people were in your session?
Somewhere around 40-ish.
Okay. I mean, that's a pretty well attended session, I would say. So again, the only reason I ask, I'm just kind of curious, like, it's one of those sessions where it's like super specific. Somebody has to know like what it is and say, yes, I want to go learn more about that. So I'm wondering, I wish we knew like out of that too, like were like half of them just curious, like they've never really looked at it before, and we don't really have a way of knowing. But
So I've given this talk a whole bunch of times, and
Yeah.
usually what'll happen is you get a bunch of web developers. In this case, it was almost everybody there was a .NET developer. I usually ask while I'm doing it.
Oh, okay.
And then you get like one or two data scientists. Sometimes you'll have a data scientist who does Python and they want to learn about R, or sometimes a data scientist is bored and they would just want to troll me, which is fine. That's also good. I'm fine
Yeah.
with that. This time we didn't get any data scientists, so I don't know if they had a better session to go to or something.
that's pretty
So
good.
so I guess one of the things that I'm still trying to get my head around is how do I know when I'm using R if I'm getting something useful back from my data? Because I know there's a lot of times when I try to use statistics and I'm getting something back, and is this really an interesting finding?
That's a good question. I don't have a good answer to it.
Well, and I think what prompted that was like it was tabs versus spaces, right?
Yeah.
So they found that people who use spaces make more money,
Yes.
and they make like 20% more money.
or 9, but either way,
Yeah.
it was enough to be significant.
Yeah, and of course the guy who did the analysis, then he got bashed in the comments because while it was true, it was like correlation is not causation or something. I don't know, something to that effect. So
Yeah, well, and I think part of that is while R is a good language to do the calculations, there's nothing particularly magical about R that's going to save your bacon. At the end of the day, you have to learn actual statistics and be able to analyze data. Now, R will help you become more data literate, which is good, but R isn't going to do the work for you. Like, you have to know what to do
So
in
we still
R.
have to know what kind of outcome we're trying to look for. It's not going to be like, here's magic, get info out of my data function.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and one of the nice things about R is that if you want to run a bunch of statistics against your data set all at once, you can do that pretty easily. Like there's a few methods in R that you can run. You can get your like ranges and mean, median, that sort of thing all at once. And so maybe you can figure out whether one central tendency is better than the other. But at the end of the day, with like the tabs versus spaces thing, if you're talking like correlation versus causation, that's kind of outside of the scope of the programming language. It's more of a wetware thing, not a software thing. It's just like writing a .NET application or writing a web application, and you're building towards the wrong requirements. At that point, it's not the code's fault, it's your fault.
I can blame the code. It's always the code's fault.
Well, I mean, I another thing is kind of just understanding your data. Like the thing that I always find interesting is when you watch sports, like, I watch football, and you always hear like they'll throw out interesting stats.
Right.
Sometimes they're common, but sometimes like, oh, this is the first time somebody's done this since like 1982. And obviously you have to have an understanding of your data and how to, what to even look for to kind of pull those, little gems of data out.
Well, and sometimes with sports too. Like I was reading Nate Silver's book, Signal and the Noise, and he talks about how there's actually a lot of debate around those statistical measurements, that some of them don't necessarily convey the data that people think they do. So there's like a whole rabbit hole of here's your number, but how is that number generated? And there's different methods for generating that number, and you got to make the argument that that particular series of steps is legitimate. So again, wetware over software.
Yeah, that's interesting because we had a data visualization person we were talking to earlier, and like lying with charts basically was one of the things that we brought up, and you could do the same thing with R, right? Kind of look for things that are, while factually true, are super misleading. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And that's any statistical package. Like I do a talk on D3JS, and I have a whole series of slides on how to lie with data.
Yeah.
You know, manipulate the scale to make things look bigger than they are, or smaller, or whatever.
Yep.
There's a lot of manipulation around there, and understanding how statistics are created, is going to help you be able to analyze that. So, like for instance, if you're doing sports, if there's some like this number tells you how good somebody is at the sports. I don't do sports, so I'm just making this up.
Yeah.
Sports ball.
Yeah, so if it's like here's your sports ball rating, and then this person's sports ball rating is 95, and this person's sports ball rating is 90. It's like how does that actually?
So if
compute?
they played against each other, this person would definitely win.
Yeah,
Every
exactly.
time.
Yeah, like we know we're certain. Like really, they just never have to play.
Yeah, you just have to avoid that combination lest you get proven wrong, or maybe that person will win 5% of the time or something. Yeah. But if you understand how that statistic is made, maybe you can come up with better predictions.
Yeah, very interesting. Anything else in your session that's sort of something that us as a developer might not really think about?
In terms of R? Or
yeah,
statistics?
in terms of R, like, is there anything like you started looking into R and you were just like, whoa, that's really super interesting?
For me, it's all about data literacy. So, and I spend like the first probably 10 minutes talking about this. And it's this general idea of having an understanding of how statistics are generated and how numbers are created, and just having an idea, because we have so much data. Like the volume is just insane. We have, there's like thousands of tweets a second and all this other stuff. Like they have these statistics. It's like petabytes of information, or they talk about how like we've created more information in the last month than we have in human history, and all sorts of weird stuff like that on the face of it doesn't make any sense, but we have more data available to us than we've ever had before. Right. And it's just increasing, especially once you start building in like IoT and some of the other data sources and just what people are making on the internet. It's trying to figure out what to do with that is this huge task. And especially as sort of creepy things happen with data, like you get the predictive analytics. Like there was this news story from Target where Target figured out that a teenage girl was pregnant before her dad did. And sort of understanding a little bit more about how that happens. That's really important.
That's a little creepy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for me, one of the key takeaway is if you're interested in the data you have, R can definitely make a huge difference in it. R is fairly easy to learn, and it's available, especially if you're a Microsoft developer, in most of its products. I mean, it's in SQL Server, it's in Visual Studio, it's in many of the Azure services out there.
Yep, R is easy to learn. It's free and it's really low ceremony, so it's a great tool to add to your tool belt.
Very cool. So where can people find you online?
You can find me at my website, DustinEwers.com, and I'm also on Twitter at DustinJEwers.
Okay.
So those would be the two easiest places to find me.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us.
Thank you.
Right now we have Danny Warren. He works at Pluralsight and is a former Microsoft MVP. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, and you recently got your hat upgraded. We mentioned you on the show. You had that awesome picture where somebody noticed you for the hat you had, so we thought we'd get you a shiny new one.
Oh, that was such a funny story. I was just at some food trucks, and I'm like, oh, what should I eat? And someone taps me on the shoulder. Hey, is that the MS Dev podcast hat? Well, yes, it is. It is. And then we departed, and that was it. And then I went and got my corn dog, and he showed up. So we had a big old conversation about like how cool it was. So he's Shout out to you, Python student. I don't remember your name. I don't actually think we even introduced our names.
That was a lifelong connection right there.
Yeah, it was.
So whenever I see somebody with a blue hat, I'm always like, oh, I wonder if that's an MS Dev Show hat, and it never is until I come here.
Yeah.
But I'm waiting to like be like some other place, like down in like traveling to like Houston or Hawaii or something, and then like see somebody with the hat. So
Just got to walk in Lehigh, Utah, and you'll see it around.
yeah. Be at this place at this time, and you will see that. Yeah, that's not what I'm looking for. So what are you working on?
So working on, I just started at Pluralsight 3 months ago, and working on their plans team. So we work with enterprise, and we work with them to show ROI of Pluralsight and try to get all of the employees of these different enterprises access to Pluralsight so they can learn new skills and close the skills gap.
Okay, that's pretty cool. Yeah, because I think it's in an enterprise. I mean, you always have this issue, like an employee's like, I really want to have access to these Pluralsight videos, but it doesn't matter how much it costs. If it was, let's pretend like Pluralsight was $1.
Yeah.
Like it's difficult to get your enterprise to spend $1 just because it's like there's this whole process around it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So getting it sounds like you get it at the company level. And then that flows down to everybody, which then is just like one shot, and then everybody has access.
That's right. Yeah, and we like to say it's a great benefit especially if you want to keep your employees engaged in on site.
Yeah. No, I love it. I mean, sometimes I'll just open up videos on topics I'm interested in and just let them play in the background. So that's pretty cool. So then you mentioned earlier you're doing some Cortana stuff. So what's that all about?
Yeah, so I'm very passionate about speech recognition and how to help people that, help everyone so they can use their devices without having to touch a bunch of buttons. I don't know about you all, but when I'm driving, I'm told that it's illegal to use my phone, which is good, but it's hard to use it. So trying to find ways to improve that experience, and Cortana is one of those options, much like Alexa and Google Assistant. But the cool thing about Cortana is it is cross-platform. It works on all devices through an app, and it also allows you to use chatbots and surface those up as applications.
Yeah, that's the cool thing, right?
So we can write our apps as chatbots, and using the Cortana app on iOS and Android and natively on Windows, we can expose our little chatbots through there.
That's exactly right.
That's cool.
So one of the topics in my session that I'll be discussing here at that conference is the idea that you write all your logic in this web API under the premise that it is a chatbot, and then you surface it through multiple different layers or channels, what they're really called. So Cortana Skills is a channel, and you can make your own application, its own UI experience on top of that same thing.
Yeah, because we had an episode on bots long time ago.
Yeah, a little over a year ago.
I think with Dan Driscoll. And it was interesting because I had asked him about that. I said, hey, like there's this Cortana thing that I have to write code for, and then there's this bot thing that I have to write code for. Like, and I really have like the same interaction model. Like I'm asking a question, getting an answer. It sure would be nice if those were the same thing. And fortunately, smart people made all of that happen, so you can have one code base.
Yeah, it's pretty phenomenal. It's really fun to see it come to life, and it's really fun to write it in this context of a chatbot, and then all of a sudden say, like, hey, Cortana, launch computer, and then it comes up and says, oh, enter your captain's log, and then I get to just tell it to do a captain's log.
So when you say chatbot, are you leveraging specifically like the Microsoft SDK for that?
Yeah, it's called the Microsoft Bot Framework, and they have a specific SDK that you can install via NuGet, and they also have a Node version that you can use as well, but I particularly specialize in C#, so that's where I'm at.
So with that Microsoft Bot Framework, are there like special things on top of it just for Cortana, or is it still just pretty generic?
It's pretty generic. You can tailor it towards certain channels, so you can have different interactions depending on which channel is coming into the bot, but I don't cover that in this session. But what is cool is there's these properties on that you set. One is like text that you're going to show and chat, and then one is speak, and that's what gets spoken if some kind of channel supports speaking. And so Cortana just picks up that speech part and just speaks it.
So you get that for free.
You get that for free. Yeah.
Okay, I'm a little confused now. So, so you can be interacting by typing, and then also have Cortana can sort of switch modes. Is that what you're getting at?
Yes.
Okay, I did not know that because I always thought of it as sort of binary. Like I'm choosing this interaction model, and then I could, if I hook my bot up to Cortana directly, and I just want Cortana to be the front end, then it would be voice, or I guess I could type to that as well. I didn't realize it was you could do mixed like that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so you can think of it more like your bot API is just the information and the logic. And then each channel, so that would be Cortana Skills or your application or like Slack decides how it's going to interpret that information. And
Okay.
so
Yeah, that
there's
makes sense.
specific properties that they've exposed, Microsoft has exposed on the interactions, and you can say this is the text, and then this is what you would speak if you have some kind of voice layer on top of it.
But it could speak all of it, obviously.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it could speak all of it, and it could speak none of it.
Okay, that's
And,
very cool.
and then in addition to that, at Build, they were talking about adaptive cards, and they really played up the bot angle to that. I'm assuming that's starting to show itself now too?
Yeah.
Or is that still forward-looking a little bit?
So I haven't played with the adaptive cards too much, but they do have some built-in cards that you can use for like prompting, and you just plug in your own data.
So you could have like a hero image or some kind of graphic like that popped up along with the text or voice, or instead of.
Yes, exactly, and those are called attachments. And so certain kinds of dialogues, the thing you're using for interaction processing is called a dialogue, and certain kinds of dialogue support doing attachments, images, or JSON to say tell the chat client how to render something. And so it's quite flexible, and this is where different channels come into play, where you could customize the interaction between your own application versus Cortana Skills versus Slack.
Okay. It's pretty cool.
Very cool. So what else do you have in your presentation? What kind of cool stuff?
So I also will show off some voice commands, and this allows you to launch your application and deep link into it so that you can have any kind of control that you want. It allows you to pass along dictation text to your application from launch, so that's really powerful. And then also, I like to show off location in UWP because it's kind of fun to say, "Hey computer," or "Hey Cortana computer, where am I?" And it'll or "Beam me up, Scotty," and it shows all that off. So it's
Okay.
fun.
Yeah, what was there was a question I was going to ask you earlier, but so if I want to build like one of these applications, and do I have to be an expert in Cortana and in bots, or like should I just build the bot first? I mean, is that a reasonable approach, or do I get a whole bunch of extra things by thinking about the Cortana angle right up front?
Yeah. So in my demo, I wrote it bot first, and then I just take the text and I
Okay.
put it in the
Love
speak property, and so it's saying exactly what you're reading.
Okay.
There's also a language called SSML, Speech Specification Markup Language. It's its own beast. It's really cool, but you can control tone and pitch. But you got to spend some time to learn how to do that, and I don't show that off.
Yeah. Do you think there's any hope in sight for this? I always call it like a concierge bot, but like ultimately, I feel like the implementations of bots out there are pretty terrible. Like if you look at the Amazon Echo, for example, they talk about, I think they have like 10,000 bots or whatever that they support. Yeah, or 10,000 apps or whatever their lingo is. And it's like, oh great, 10,000 things I have to remember, if I were to enable all of them, because you have to activate it and then ask it. You even in your example, you said, hey Cortana, computer. Yeah.
Do something.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you see any hope on the horizon of being able to have the thing you're talking to be a little bit more intelligent and just know how to route things?
I do, but it's a really hard problem to solve, I think, still. You're talking about taking something completely out of context and trying to decide what context it should be in.
Yeah.
And I feel like context is still one of those things that's really hard for computers to just do for us.
Yeah.
And that's why you try to give it some context by saying, I want to execute it against this endpoint or this application. And so for the bot that I show off, it's once you say, hey, Cortana, that launches Cortana up, and you say computer or launch computer, and that launches the bot.
Yeah.
And then the bot interaction starts.
Interesting. Because browsers figured out, right? You say like, what are the hours of this restaurant? And they've already like scraped it and they've turned that into like logical information, and they can like give you that, or how old, I was going to say George Washington, how old is Carl, right? And it'll like tell you the age, like it sort of parsed that. And it's figured it out. You're not saying, I'll say, hey Bing, because there's that won't activate anything, but you don't say like, hey Bing, ask IMDb how old is Patrick Swayze?
Yeah.
Like you don't do that, right?
But when we talked about being generic, like the thought that came up to my mind is like, order me a pizza or order me some chocolate. Well, how many different kinds
Yeah.
of pizza places are there? Which one are the ones that I might actually like? Or
Yeah, I can see why it's an interesting problem.
And some of the big ones might want to play well, but some of them might want to not play well on purpose. Like,
Yeah. Well, I think the ones that surface that, I mean, it should pop up and say Pizza Hut or Domino's,
Yeah.
Like these are the two. These are the two
Little
people that
Caesars is there, but they don't want to play nice, so they just get excluded.
Yeah, they won't tell us how to order a pizza, through voice. So we're just not going to include them.
Yeah, and there's a difference, I think, between trying to seek context and just giving a bunch of information.
Yeah.
When you ask Google or Bing what age someone is, it's going to report you an age, but it's also going to give you all these other search results because it can. And it doesn't have to know exactly what you're talking about. It just has to give you the shotgun approach. Whereas on a bot, you can't say, well, were you talking about this? Were you talking about this? It's going to get annoying really quick.
Well, Apple does it, and it does get annoying really quick.
Right. And so I think there's this this training we're going to have to go through. And someday I do hope that we get to the point where we can just say, hey, Cortana, I really want to just order a pizza. And it knows what my favorite pizza place is because I ordered there before, or it knows one that's close by, or maybe two, and just says, hey, do you want this or this?
Yeah.
And then moves on from there.
Yeah, and actually, if I think back to kind of the original selling point of some of these things, right? They were like personal assistants, right?
Yeah.
So now maybe we should just think of it that way. Like if I have a personal assistant and I say, order me a pizza, hopefully he or she knows like what I want on the pizza. But like, I don't know if they know I'm busy, maybe they're not even going to ask me like Pizza Hut, Domino's, the local place, like. They're going to be like, it's probably quick. They're going to take into these other things into account, and then they don't even have to ask me.
Yeah, I think the part where it gets hard is even that's an easy scenario, but the personal assistant needs to be different for each person because you might want like, these are my favorite ones, and for me, I might want a new one every time.
Yeah.
But like I like or dislike certain things, so
Yeah.
that's where it gets, I think, really challenging to write these bots for that.
That's interesting. There's no way to do the feedback, right? Like after you get the pizza, like. You don't say,
it
hey,
was
Core.
good, but I wanted something new.
Yeah, hey, Core. Yeah, I didn't really like that pizza. And it's like, oh, okay. Next time I'll get it from a different place.
You just got to give some feedback, some context.
Yeah.
Rate your last interaction with your bot.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that's one of the things, getting back to the topic, that the bot framework at least does for single conversations is it keeps that context of the conversation, integrated. It's not like what were we just talking about?
Yeah.
What's really interesting about that is you could write a bot that you say the activation phrase could be order pizza. And then your bot now becomes the order pizza bot. And then you as a developer can just say, well, I know that Danny loves Little Caesars. It's a true story, but don't tell anyone. And then it will order me a pizza. And I'll sadly have to go pick it up because they don't deliver. But, you can have all these different options
Well,
now.
I want Cortana to pick it up for me.
Yeah. That might be the end of the world.
Actually, that would be Uber Eats. Yeah. Or it dispatches somebody from like Fiverr.com.
There you go.
Yeah. So, I'm wondering, there was, we were in, and maybe we still are, it felt like we were in like bot frenzy for a while, and maybe it was just like within Microsoft, like when bots were announced, it's just like bot all the things. And over time, I don't want to, I actually don't think that frenzy's really like gone down that much. Like it's still sort of like that.
Yes.
But I feel like, there's like that internal, like, hey, look at all these bot opportunities. And I kind of feel like on the outside of the world, everybody else is like, what are bots? Like, they're not really thinking about that. So I'm sure the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle there. But I'm just thinking like for the person who is listening and they have an application that does X, Y, Z, and they're just like, listen, like we haven't had bot functionality before. We haven't integrated with Cortana. Like, why should we do this? So I guess that's my first question is like, should they even look at this? Like, is this worthwhile? That's my kind of my main first question there.
So I would say, think about what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Are you trying to open up more avenues for interaction with your software? And if you are, then a bot's a great way to do that because especially if you use the Microsoft bot framework, I can't say enough good things about it because you can integrate it into Slack, Cortana Skills, Microsoft Teams, Facebook Messenger. And it just, the list goes on and on and on. And I'm sure more will just be added.
Yeah.
And so if you're trying to open it up, you can even simplify what your app, your software does into some core competencies that can be done through text or some speech to text, text to speech kind of scenarios. If you're more about just trying to add a really rich experience to your software and you just want it to be, really beautiful and you want people to use your website or your mobile app, then a bot may not be the right answer for what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I'm thinking that just most people aren't trying to do any of those things, right? They just have they have the app and they're just like my app works pretty well. I mean, I kind of liken it to when the mobile web started getting popular. And let's just go like pre-iPhone. We actually we can even go post iPhone. I remember having these conversations where it's like, okay, we have our app, like our website, should we make a mobile version of our website? And it was always this thing like, no, that's a lot of work. And it was, right?
Yeah,
That's a lot of work. And like, look at it's funny. It's funny to think about in hindsight because look at our stats. There's no mobile users using our site. So why should we build a mobile app? So you get into that whole thing where it's funny. It's because you don't have a mobile. Doesn't work well on mobile. So of course nobody is going there. So everybody was like, I shouldn't say everybody. Most people, I think, were reluctant to just say, "Hey, let's throw some money at this problem and make a mobile website." Why should I make a mobile website? Now it seems like so obvious to us, but I'm wondering if that same thing is happening in bots. Where right now we're just like, "Why should I make a bot?" And maybe in 5 years, I'll be like, everybody has a bot. Of course, you have that interaction model. So I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's I don't know if I have any thoughts necessarily on that. But the one word of caution I would say is that when I go use websites, and they will remain nameless, but they are certain telecommunications companies or other such things, where they have a bot that comes up and says, "Can I help you? My name is, such and such." I'm like, well, your name is not actually such and such. You're just a chat bot, and you're not a real person.
Dispatcher 32.
Yeah, and it's like, seriously, if you're going to have a bot, at least make it obvious that it's a bot so that you're not lying to myself or my grandmother. Please, don't lie to my grandmother. And make it useful. So if its job is to get you in line to talk to a real person, then make that obvious. So whatever it is that your bot's purpose is, make it obvious that that's the reason. Because if you're not going to do that, it gets really frustrating. And I've heard this from numerous people, and myself included.
I was going to say, maybe bots on those websites are actually really good now, but I refuse to use them. So one day they're going to be good, and I'll still be like, no, I'll be, get off my lawn. 000 whenever I call in, and
Awesome.
just distrusting of those things. Any other thoughts on bots that you wanted to mention?
I would love to see bots replace the time I have to spend on my phone when it's like the little dial into each section. Like if I'm going to call my telecommunications company, let me get everything going, and then let me push a button and call me back when you're ready to actually have me talk to a real person.
That is such a good point. I would love to talk to a bot and say, listen, my fiber line got cut, and it understands like what the actual problem is. Yeah. It actually understands the problem. And then it goes, okay, you need to be talking to this department, and they, they're pretty busy today, but they will call you back in approximately 45 minutes. Like, I'd be like, oh, you saved me so much time.
It's amazing.
That would be useful. So I love that.
And the real world example today is if you had to go through that, you'd be sitting on hold for 45 minutes and go to the wrong department.
Oh, and then the human, I'm gonna hold myself back here, but you get that first human, and nothing against that human, but they don't, they're not the person that I should be talking to. Mm-hmm. They're the human that's just like they're a warm body that's really no better than the bot, and I need to talk to the next human, who will get me to the next human, who actually gets me to the human that's like, oh, your fiber line is cut, and now the back door to all of that now is I just go on Twitter and I complain, and then they dispatch it to the right person, and it's like magic. But it doesn't work whenever you actually call in. So
this is true.
Yeah,
this is true. I've
and
used
now
Twitter many times to solve problems.
we started talking about Cortana, and now I'm sad.
Well, on a bright
related.
side.
Okay. Any other questions, Carl?
No, if people want to find out more about you or Cortana, where can they find you online?
they should go to Danny D. Warren on Twitter and GitHub and LinkedIn and any other social media site you want to find me on.
Just ask your local friendly neighborhood bot.
There you go. I'll have one set up for you.
Awesome.
And we'll also have a new blog site up soon.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming on in real life.
Thank you.